everyone, and welcome to FECast, the official podcast of Friends of Eternal. I am your host, Sunyveil, and today I am joined by ECQ champion, The Boxer. Congratulations, my friend, and welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. I know because of the quarantine, it's been difficult to get you on, but I'm definitely glad we found a time that you could make it, especially after winning the tournament. And we are also joined by often mentioned, but rarely seen, I think this is your first time on the show, MurderOfCrows. Welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here.
Yeah, it's definitely good to have you here, especially, I don't know if you listen and hear how often your name is mentioned, but it's pretty frequent, I think, as far as people that have not been on the show and whose name is mentioned.
Yeah, no, it's great to finally be on here. I saw that you guys were doing the morning time slot, so I jumped at the opportunity.
Yeah, it's great to finally have you on. All right, so those of you who have been following the show, you know that I have this horrible tendency of inviting the Boxer on along with the person that beat him in the previous tournament, or the tournament the previous weekend. Well, this week that could literally not happen. And to add a little taste of my own medicine, the Boxer beat me in the top 32. So let's get started with that. The Boxer, you won the ECQ, and you won with a 5-faction Kilo and Vox deck of your own creation. I don't think very many other people are playing it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so a week and a half ago, Murder posted this screenshot of this crazy deck that had Recurring Nightmare, Kilo, and Vox, and I wasn't thinking about competitive play, but I was like, oh, that looks cool, and he gave me the list, and I started playing it, and it was better than it should have been. The idea behind the deck is the Vox decks have sort of taken over the meta, and you needed something bigger. Like the mirror, I don't know how much you played of it, is awful. It may be skill testing, but it's also just one of the most draining mirrors you can possibly play. It often goes down to decking by Two-Face.
I don't know about you, but that sounds like a great time to me.
And so this adding Kilo is the way to break that mirror. And like you also get all kinds of tutor targets. You get Lumen Reclaimer, you get Sabertooth Pride Leader, you get Thrashing Goonworm, you get probably my favorite Snow Crush Animist. You got to see that one up close.
Yeah, I felt pretty good about my Vox matchup. I was playing Valkyries, of course, talked about it last week. But man, Snow Crush Animist got me both games. I felt like I was pretty far ahead until Snow Crush Animist hit the board both times.
And that was the game plan for adding the Animist in there, is it'll win matchups that no other card can. And being able to tutor for it off of Kilo at any point was a huge innovation in the deck.
The fact that the giant made by Kato costing 8 going into a Snow Crush Animist, I'm sure that was a big part of the plan that I didn't see coming, because, well, when I played against the Boxer in the top 32, that was the first time playing against the 5-faction deck.
Well, even listening to the commentators, they were talking about the list and saying, like, there's this Animist, how are they ever going to get enough skills on a unit where they can get it? And then that game against you, he cracks the giant for it, and they're just in awe of what's happening.
Yeah, it hurts to think about even now.
But yeah, like the Boxer was saying, is I had been playing a bunch of even Kilo decks. I've been playing a bunch of even Vox decks, and they both do different things really well. The Kilo can go really over the top, and the Vox can grind extremely well and eventually build up these large nightmares. So I was like, you know what? Let's just smash them together. Interloper's a broken card. Let's see if it works. And like the first or second game, I ended up with 47 power Recurring Nightmares. Next game, I had huge Nightmares with Killer, and it was just doing very powerful things. So we decided, let's see if we can refine it.
So Recurring Nightmare wasn't in the final version of the deck, right?
Or sorry, Endless Nightmare. Endless Nightmare is the one. Yeah.
For those of you listening at home, Endless Nightmare is the 2-cost Shadow and Time 3/1. It can't block, and has the recursion ability of Time Shadow at the end of your turn. If you have 4 or more remaining power, play Endless Nightmare from your void. So did that make the final list? Just like a couple copies?
2 copies did. It was for a while 1, but we got a little worried about the Ixton and Spellcraig matchups and just mirrors and like killer nightmares are a great way to win the mirror other than Animus, and that 2 slot fluctuated a lot.
Yeah, between the numbers on Blightmoth, Devour, Nightmare, Worthy Cause, Two-Face, those cards we did a lot of shifting around with the numbers. You want enough to be reasonable against aggro, but you don't want too much, especially with the Moths against control or Worthy Cause against unitless. So there's a lot of massaging of the numbers to find a happy middle ground where you're not committing too much to any particular matchup.
All right, so both you, the Boxer, and Murder of Crows were on this even Kilo deck, even Vox Kilo deck. 2 questions. 1, did you know that it was insane going into the tournament? And 2, how many other people were privy to the fact that this was a deck, and did they know how good it was? Basically, were there other people that were also playing this deck going in?
I'll start with answering number 2. So T. Chambers from Team Rankstar, I think, was the only other player that played the deck. He went 17-11 and said he wanted to change the thing about the deck, was really happy with it. Ilya knew about the list. And then since Carnage was the one that I started this whole meme deck with, I shared it with him and I think 2 other people out of Misplay. They had access to an early version, but that was about it that knew of the deck.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of those Team Misplay people ended up on even Cumbre.
Mm-hmm.
As for, did we know it was insane going in? We knew that a lot of matchup, it had a lot of really good matchups and few unwinnable ones. The problem is this is a really, really hard deck to play, and you cannot be on autopilot while playing it, because even just playing the wrong power on turn 2 can lose you the game right then and there. So we knew it had a good Vox matchup. We knew if we played it well, it would do well. We knew it would get significantly better in the open deck list part of the tournament.
Right, because then you could formulate your plan based on, because there are a lot of different cards in the deck, right? So you can formulate a plan going into the game, and then once you see your opening hand, you can determine whether you can enact that plan or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the deck is built to be extremely flexible with the game plan. You can play controlling against aggro until you eventually get to Kato Giants, or you can be the aggressor against Spellcraig. So it's very flexible, and the number of different lines that you can take is just astronomical. I was watching the Boxer the day before the tournament, and I saw him put Killer onto a Reclaimer. And when it died, it goes back into, it shuffles in and has Killer. And I had never seen that line. And the Boxer said he only discovered it the day before. So even us, who had been playing the deck for a week and a half, tuning it, we're still finding lines.
All right. So there's a lot of talk about nerfing Even-Handed Golem. What do you guys think? Do you think that either Even-Handed Golem or some other card from the Vox deck that's been tearing up the meta, do you think that there's a card that needs nerfing in the Throne metagame right now?
I think there are 2 cards. One is Unfamiliar Interloper, and 2 is Arc of Soul.
You really think that Interloper needs a nerf? Wow.
Oh, it's absurd. It's possibly... not possibly, it is the best card in Eternal right.
I think that's a pretty bold statement, and I am definitely not on that side of things. I will definitely agree that Arc of Soul needs a nerf. Holy cow. I actually spent yesterday complaining to P. Chapin about it. This was not unsolicited, actually. I got a message being like, hey, what are cards that you think that you're tired of seeing in Throne? I was like, oh man, let me tell you about Arc of Soul.
Yeah.
So, geez, the thing about Interloper that I think makes it, I think the only thing that makes it good is that it works so well with Kilo and it works so well with Fox, right? I think if it weren't for those 2 cards, we wouldn't be talking about it needing to be nerfed.
Well, Here's the thing. People were late to the party on this one, but it saw a ton of play in expedition decks that did well before this throne ECQ. And the problem, it gives you so many more keepable hands in any kind of sacrifice deck, and it lets you get away with power bases that you shouldn't be able to. You get to run less power, and you get to be more ambitious. You get to run more gentle grazers, and it also, like, it triggers Shrine. It's corrupted as a whole is just crazy.
So I think as far as looking at the deck and how it ends up winning the games and generating advantage, yeah, Vox, Kilo, Kato, Golem are kind of the stars of that. But this deck would not be able to function at all and wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Interloper. It's the card that pulls the whole deck together, and the combination of Golem plus Interloper being colorless cards that allow you to cheat on power and play 5 factions of other broken things. Those are the cards that allow it, and Interloper is, I agree with Boxer, is one of, if not the most powerful cards in Eternal right now, as unassuming as it is.
I'm still not sold. I understand that it's what makes the deck work, but I don't think that inherently means that it's broken. Like, I think that part of what makes the 5 faction works is that you also have another fantastic 2-drop. It might be like the most underrated card in Eternal, but like you also just have Even-Handed Golem, which also does the same thing of making certain unkeepable hands totally great and can be played regardless of the influence cost. Regardless of the influence that you have when playing it on turn 2.
Yeah, and having both of those in the deck make it much, much smoother overall versus if you're trying to do this off of just power.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about some of the other decks to come out of the tournament. I know we've spent a long time focusing on this deck that won. I mean, it's a novel deck that came out and took down the tournament. In the finals, the Boxer defeated Jocked, which was playing a Stone Scar deck, a very interesting Stone Scar deck that was revolving around Tota Pioneer. And I definitely recommend checking it out. I went 10-1 with it last night, as people who are in the Discord or following my Twitter know about. I only had a set amount of time to hit Masters, and I just barely did it, thanks to Jock's list. So definitely check out that Stone Scar deck. We also had a Spellcrag in the top 4 and an Even Vox in the top 4. And rounding out the top 8, we have another Stone Scar aggro, another Even Vox, a creation deck that's Firetime Justice, and the Throne Room deck that Chamomilk built that we talked about last week, piloted by Rexilus. And, and I think that another takeaway of this tournament is don't count out Chamomilk's aggro decks. They seem to be they've been incredibly successful.
He's broken metas before.
Yeah, he's broken metas before. You can bet he's going to do it again. Congratulations to everyone that did well this past tournament, whether you're standing on top of a World's Invite and what, $2,000 the Boxer?
I think one this year.
Oh, only 1,000? Well, that's a bummer. But the World's Invite is
ticket
worth
to Worlds.
Yeah, that's worth significantly more, right? And I mean, congratulations. I mean, we had 3 of the top 8 are from the Friends of Eternal Discord, and out of them, 2 are, well, I guess only 1 is really super active, but of Discord servers, I'm sure that Rexilus is editing Sunyveil, stepping in to save past Sunyveil's life here. So what I was trying to say is that Rexilus doesn't spend a whole ton of time on Discord, but when he does, he spends it in the Friends of Eternal Discord. So make sure you check us out. Link is in the description. All right, back to the show. That'll be it for the ECQ recap portion of the show. Let's talk about this new set that's coming out on Sunday. I mean, it's Friday right now. Correction, the set comes out on Monday. Sorry for the confusion. Really feels like this snuck up on us. I guess they released a set last month also, which is why this feels pretty fresh. We have a new set, Shadow of the Spire, coming out. That's going to have 23 cards, and some of them are really exciting, so we're going to spend the rest of the episode talking about them. So let's start with the big one. Ikaria the First Reaper, 6 cost, Sextuple Shadow, 5/5, Nightmare Valkyrie, Flying Deadly. Summon, kill an enemy unit or site, and entomb. The enemy player discards each spell from their hand. Holy cow. This is, I think a lot of people are saying that this card is insane, and rightly so. It can kill, like, there aren't that many units that can kill a site when you play them.
Yeah, so this one was one of the early access cards if you pre-ordered the bundle. So I picked that up and immediately started playing with Icaria, and I can confirm that she is extremely powerful. I've tried her in a couple different shells so far, even Kilo and Throne, and then in Expedition, I've done kind of a Tazbu style mono shadow Argenport, and as well a Kilo list there. And in all three places, she does a lot of work. I think my record is making the opponent discard 6 spells.
So are you playing Icaria and then immediately sacrificing, or is that the goal for when you can play her? Or is it just kind of a side thing where you only have one unit on the board? It's a big problem for them. They have to kill it, but then they also have to discard a lot of spells from their hand.
Yeah, I found that most of the time I'm just stabilizing with it. But in the Kilo list specifically, usually the next turn I'll sacrifice it and it can go and get a Vara to bring it back immediately and kill a second unit. So with Kilo, it can chain extremely well. And that was the list that I had the 6 spell discard. I played Icaria, or I Kiloed into Icaria and then immediately devoured her and made the opponent discard 6 spells while I drew 2. And I don't think I even killed a unit on that one. It was just I knew they had spells, so I made them discard their hand.
Yeah, definitely looks like she's going to be a force in the metagame. This next one on the document is it's a card that I think is interesting. I don't know if it's going to see play. This is Vorlon Core. It's a 5-cost 4/2 for double justice, double primal. It has Killer and Overwhelm, but invulnerable to damage on your turn. This is kind of like Auric Runehammer. I think it's a pretty close approximation. It hits something for 4 and it's invulnerable to the turn on the turn you play it. Do you guys think that this card's going to make an impact?
I think it may see play as a one of in Kilo decks, but the rate is really, really small for a 5-drop after. I'd rather just play a Valkyrie Enforcer in Throne, and I'm sure there's some thing in Expedition that would be, maybe it would see some play in Expedition. I don't know. It's a cool effect, but it's expensive and understated.
I think that's a fair assessment of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Both Paladin and Dinosaurs are tribes that could be fun to be a part of, but then being double justice, double primal, it feels difficult to sway into either one of those. So trying to capitalize on those synergies doesn't seem too likely.
Yeah, I suppose that's fair. I think that, a lot of the times when you've played the game for as long as I have, your evaluation of cards might be stuck in a different era. Like, I might be evaluating this based off of comparisons to cards that saw play in like a set 1 or set 2 metagame. Whereas these days in Throne, this might, like, you could play Garden of Omens and just have every spell in your hand instantly be free. So I could be misevaluating this based on, the wrong time.
Yeah, I think as far as power level goes, you just compare it to Icaria as far as which one do you think is going to see more play. And it's pretty clearly going to be the Icaria. So it might see some play here or there, but it's certainly not on the same level.
Okay, let's take a look at the next one. Open Contract. This is a 1-cost Stone Star card. It costs Shadow and Fire. It's a spell. It says kill a unit with cost 4 or less. Reduce the cost of each unit in its owner's deck by 1. I think that this is a really exciting card. It being a slow spell means that's probably not going to see play in aggro decks because, well, I don't know. Some people are talking about reducing the cost of your own cards, but I think that's not likely unless you're playing some sort of combo deck. I think this is going to be just like a nice one to have in a Winchest-like deck, a FTS deck, where, you want to play your site and defend it, and this is going to be a good way to do that. Killing things that cost 4, Sandstorm Titan, not that Sandstorm Titan necessarily sees play anymore, but Sandstorm Titan.
Here's where I see this. I like this in the market of FJS Carver because it does 2 important things. It kills Tokas, just for 1, no questions asked. It also, you can play it on one of your own units, and then your press gangs can fetch Katos.
Okay, yeah, that sounds fantastic. Are you sure you don't want to just, replace your normal removal spell with this? Because, the downside seems pretty low. Your opponent has to draw the card. They have to draw the cards that you've reduced the cost of. And I mean, that's not a given. Like any given deck is going to be like a third units, maybe more if you're playing something like a Carver deck, but also maybe less if you're playing, some sort of mid-range deck.
I don't know, I'm kind of down on having a ton of removal right now to begin with, and like in Carver, I think the only thing you really want right now is maybe Combust. Not even Madness. Like I haven't sketched it out. Maybe you want to be able to kill big flyers with your main deck removal, and this can't always do that. But it's a great market option because when you're getting removal from the market, it's often because of something early your opponent does. This would provide a nice removal suite. This and then either Pristine Light or Roland's Warblade. I'm not totally sure which one of those would be better, but one to kill small stuff, one to kill bigger.
Oh, that's a good point. Warblade out of that deck makes a lot of sense because you have a lot of units dying, so it ends up being pretty cheap. Okay, well, I'm excited to see how this one works. Let's talk about the next one. Edge of Uprising. This is an 8-cost relic weapon. It's double fire, double primal, 6/6. It costs 1 less for each of your units with 1 attack or less while it's in your hand. And it also has when you deal damage to an enemy, draw a card and discard a card. I think that this is not that great. I think it's going to lead to some Syndoc blowouts, Syndoc-like blowouts, where you get a big board early on, and then you play Edge of Uprising for really cheap, and then you start smacking them. But I think that's the fact that we have so many ways of taking care of relics in Cat, in Garden, and good market options. I just don't think that a 6/6 weapon that just loots every time you draw and discard is really going to accomplish that much.
I don't know. I don't think this... So here's where I've seen this see play. Batteries was playing it in a throne room deck. And that's a way that you get the Aegis, and you have tons of small little units. And 6/6 is a big relic weapon. If this costs 4 and you get 1 hit in, and then your opponent has to warp the game plan around trying to answer it, or else this is often going to be a 2-for-1 and some filtering.
Yeah, but does that make up for all the times where you just can't ever play it because it costs 8 on its base case?
I think you have to build your deck. All right, I don't know. It's possible.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously you do have to build your deck around it, but it just seems so much worse than the throne room ever is going to be. And to be fair, the throne room is very, very, very good, but it just doesn't seem worth the cost of building your deck with this in mind in order to consistently reduce its cost, and the opportunity cost of not having something else that's just generically good in your deck. I think that maybe there is a situation where you can where this might end up working. Oh, once. Oh gosh. Oh boy. Here we go. Even-handed golem, tend the flock.
One other thing it does, it enables tribute. This is another way than Cell to enable tribute for Kenna.
Oh my god.
Because you discard a card, and Kenna will already have a lot of small things.
All right, I guess. I'm pretty skeptical about this card. So we're talking about possible applications. Do you think that this card is going to make a significant impact on the meta?
Ultimately, I'm doubtful, but I think there are places it will be tried.
Okay, fair enough. I wonder if we can just get Stormblessed to record in 5 minutes of talking about Wrath of Caiaphas. Maybe not 5 minutes. That's a long time. Maybe 3 minutes. Stormblessed has 3 minutes. Okay, Stormblessed. This is what we're going to do. I'm gonna call Stormblessed up because I know he's excited about this card, and he's going to give a 3-minute rundown on stuff you can do with Wrath of Caiaphas. It's a 7-cost spell. It's factionless, and it says each player discards their hand, then draws 7 cards. You can pay 2 to swap Wrath of Caiaphas from your hand with a random power card from your deck. Now, I think it's really interesting that this is a card that is both power and action. Anything that is both power and action, I think, is really interesting. The flexibility, especially on expensive cards, makes it a lot more playable than either half would seem. What do you guys think about this? Do you think we have the proper combo support, or is this a card to watch out for down the line, or is it just not very good, not as good as I think it is?
I think the flexibility of the card is certainly powerful. That if you draw it early, then you can just shuffle it back for when you need it. I also think that there definitely could be something with combining it with the new power from the last expansion, Tempting Offer, so that you can bring the 7 cost down to 5 or 4 or at best 3. And then you're really getting into a very powerful card. So I think it's certainly something that's going to be worth trying. What shell exactly it looks like, I have no idea, but it's powerful for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I have no clue where to put this, but both one of your best top decks possible and way to smooth out your draws early is a good combination.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we're going to hear what Stormblessed has to say, and that segment is going to go here.
Hello, FECast. I was invited on for a special segment this week to share my thoughts on one of my favorite upcoming cards from the upcoming bundle, Shadows of the Spire. I'm sure longtime listeners can guess which card I might have been asked to provide my take on. If you guessed Wrath of Caiaphas, you'd be correct. The most obvious comparison in Eternal is with an earlier card called Talir's Unwinding. Yes. Both cards cost the same, but Talir's Unwinding can only be played in Time, Primal, and Shadow decks, and it requires a sacrifice to be played, and has Voidbound, and doesn't have the flexible and powerful option as a 2-cost play for power fixing. It isn't even close to how much better Wrath of Caiaphas is. Now, making both players get rid of their hands and then drawing a new 7 is an incredibly powerful effect. It is symmetrical, but if you have no cards in hand and your opponent has 6, then they effectively draw 1 extra card, while you effectively get to draw 6 extra cards. Even beyond the simple numerical analysis, it also has the added advantage of disrupting whatever plan the opponent was setting up with their cards. An extreme example would be that they had all non-power in their hand, and then Wrath of Caiaphas replaced it all with 7 power instead. Wrath of Caiaphas does cost 7 for such an effect, but it provides a smaller, albeit different effect for a far cheaper cost. This flexibility makes Wrath of Caiaphas potentially incredibly powerful. If you don't already have 7 power, you can toss Wrath of Caiaphas back into your deck to get power, able to redraw it in the future, presumably once you already have 7 power, and then can now play it for its powerful main mode. Its status as a factionless card means it can be played in any deck that could want it whatsoever, as long as it wants the effect it provides. And what deck could want such a card as a 7-cost powerful effect with a 2-cost power fixer? Obviously Volatility Decks. The biggest problem with Volatility Decks compared to, say, Wisdom of the Elders as your source of card advantage is that while Volatility only draws gas and can draw upwards of 4 or more, which is bonkers, Wisdom of the Elders has the benefit of that it can draw you into your power. There's a reason my Creation Volatility deck from a previous ECQ, 2 ECQ, it's like 4 ECQs actually, runs 4 Chants, 4 Talir's Favorites, and 8 Merchants with power in the market. And it's to prevent this power screw possibility that Volatility brings. Now suddenly, not only do we, the Eternal community, have another expensive, powerful late game spell, but it can also be played in the early game while showing up one of the biggest weaknesses of Volatility decks. And the key to crafting a Volatility deck is to have at least 16 hits in your deck. Before, you'd have to reach to such nonsense as Sea of Teeth, or try to trim down to 15 hits. Today, making a Volatility deck has never been easier, and I can easily see decks reaching 18, 20 cards for Volatility to draw. Curves in Eternal have never been more skewed to the right. I'm 100% looking forward to overdrawing with Volatility and having to discard at end of turn. Now, back to the main cast.
And we're back through the power of editing. That was like a 2-second pause on our side. All right, but thank you, Stormblessed, for your input. Oh, that's very, very interesting. Very interesting possible applications. I'm sure. I have faith in Stormblessed. Okay, let's talk about this next card, the Nightmare Gates. This is another really interesting one. It costs 0, but it has triple justice, triple shadow influence. It's a spell, and it says sacrifice a unit to give your relic weapon +5/+5. This is interesting on a few fronts. One, it's a permanent buff for if you're doing any sort of relic weapon recursion. Also, it costs 0. It's not something that you can play early on, nor would you want to play it early on. But it is. It doesn't cost any. It doesn't cost any power, but it does have that heavy influence cards. This seems like a really interesting market card. I mean, you can imagine having a relic weapon and playing a merchant, going to get it from the market, then sacrificing the merchant immediately in order to play this, and then all of a sudden you have a huge relic weapon that you can start recurring.
So I'm going to let Boxer go into detail about this one because I know he has some great thoughts, but also one thing to start with is the combination with Bladecrafter, and I know that's another card that the Boxer had mentioned before out of the last full set, that it was one of the sleeper cards that was just waiting to be extremely powerful and broken, and this seems like it could go really well with that.
So this costs a lot of influence. You know what we were talking about earlier? Unfamiliar Interloper, who like perfectly enables this. So costing 0 is you just get any relic weapon into play, and this is great. There's like Jadehorn. You have, what is that? Honor the Ancestors or whatever, that tribute card to bring something back. There was an old combustion cell.
Yeah, tribute play or draw a weapon, tribute play it.
Yeah, and some version of that or some more combo-y version. I think Batteries has been talking about. Like, you just need any relic weapon in play. I'll need to look through, because like you get cheap ones will be better, because this might be enough of a board impact to start justifying running Smuggler's Stash.
I'm pretty skeptical about Smuggler's Stash, but I mean, you were talking about Unfamiliar Interloper. What about Strange Blacksmith? Like, that makes Unfamiliar Interloper good.
Yes, that too. Yeah. I'm tired. That meant I've talked about that one before. Yeah, that's the best option. Just kind of a stranger, or you don't even need that many stranger, but like.
Yeah, you don't need that many, but.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the most powerful card in the set.
Right, and it's listed at uncommon. Not that rarities matter a whole lot for cards that are released as part of a campaign or whatever this set release is called, a mini expansion. I don't know, because if you purchase the expansion, you get every single card, and there's no other way of getting these cards, right? So the rarity doesn't matter a ton, but I do think it's interesting that this one is an uncommon, while as some of the other cards that we're talking about are rares or legendaries.
Can we just take a pause to kind of bring up how extremely powerful the corrupted mechanic is with cards like this? You just have so many extra bodies laying around that you don't care to sacrifice, that these sacrifice synergies have just become so abundantly powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if it was on FECast, but I remember someone, it was probably a Kamado, that was just saying like, oh, here's this great card, and it randomly has Corrupted on it too. Arboreal Grazer, not Arboreal, that's a magic card. Gentle Grazer, I think, is a very good example of that. You would play Gentle Grazer without the Corrupted, I think, or I certainly would, back in the days of Even Elysian.
Yeah.
And it just has Corrupted on it. I think Kato is another example of a card that you could probably play without its Corrupted, but it just randomly has Corrupted on it, making it extremely powerful. It also occurs to me now that both of these are legendaries out of the latest set, so hashtag cash grab or whatever. But yeah, I mean, Corrupted is just an insane ability. I feel like that the Shade doesn't get sacrificed for its intended effect very often. It does come up, of course, but most of the time it's just, hey, this thing died, now I have an extra body to mess around with, especially with things like Carver, Kato, Kilo, just anything that wants to sacrifice stuff. All right, keeping the ball rolling, next we have Rolling Spikeback. We have a 3/1, cost 3, double primal, single time. It's Aegis Reckless and summon, create, and draw a random dinosaur. I mean, 3/1 Aegis Reckless for 3 is not that exciting. We've seen units that definitely have better rate, but making a random card, that's kind of exciting. I think that anything that makes a random card, especially in this age of easy market access, is something to pay attention to. How do you guys feel about Rolling Spikeback?
I think it's a really interesting card in that if you're playing against another unit-based deck, then they may have blockers that can just eat it, but so in that case you're paying 3 to cycle for a random dinosaur. But then against a deck like Unitless, where they're not likely to have a blocker, then you have an Aegis attacker, plus you've drawn an extra threat that they are going to have to deal with. So against control strategies, it could be very good. And then against unit-based strategies, then it's quite a bit worse. So it's an interesting card design where it's good in one matchup and quite poor in the other.
I think it's important to note just a lot of dinosaurs have, like, there are a couple standouts, like Hatchling or Twin Brood, but a lot of them have really, really terrible rates. Like, worse than just create and draw a random unit.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was also thinking about that. There's like, OG Arachnodon, which is a 6/7 overwhelm for 7 or something like that. And then there's all these cards that have bond that are totally uncastable.
Oh, that's not even one of the worst ones, I think. I want this to see play because this is a fun design. I love Invoke. Like, if this Invoke, or like did something about choosing a random, or choosing between a couple dinosaurs, I think that would improve the power level and make it a lot more interesting of a card.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I agree with you on that. Invoke is a sweet mechanic. I think that it definitely comes at the risk of being overdone, but I mean, now that Invoke cards are not really a big part of the metagame anymore, I'm kind of missing it. And if this had something similar to Invoke, like Invoke a dinosaur or whatever, well, I guess that's not really possible, but if it had something similar to Invoke, I think that would be more exciting. All right, moving on, we have Silverblade Menace. This is a 4-cost 3/3 flying double shadow unit. It has summon, deal damage to the enemy player equal to the number of spells in their void, and you gain that much health. I think that everyone saw this and immediately thought anti-spellcrag tech.
Yeah, I think this one's very powerful. It's something that could be put into 5-faction. Vox is another 4-cost target. I've seen some people talking about putting it in mill decks where you're milling a lot of cards and then you drop this and deal 10, gain 10. So I think it's certainly one of the more powerful cards in the set.
Well, I think its applications are going to be pretty limited to basically just being good against Spellcrag, because, like, I was playing a deck at this past ECQ that had, I don't know, probably 10 spells in the entire deck. Even if you mill half of my deck, you mill like 30 cards or whatever, you're still only dealing 5, which isn't exactly a big payoff for once you've milled that much. So I think that, like, this is just a check to Spellcrag, and it's pretty much just that. I don't think we're going to see it a whole lot of other places, maybe against other control decks.
It also hits Reanimator pretty hard.
I suppose that's fair, yeah, that's true.
When they're milling a lot of their own deck, they're playing like 2 spells most turns. At least if the game goes long, this is like, if they can't get a big board quickly, this could kill them.
Yeah, I guess, like, if there's some way to tutor this up, I could see this as one of, or if the decks that it checks become a big part of the metagame. What'd you say?
You mean something like Kilo.
Oh, yeah, I do mean something like Kilo, I suppose.
and that's, I think, as a one-of, it's going to be extremely powerful in Kilo decks, both in Throne and Expedition.
All right, fair enough. Let's talk about Diese Cabal Racketeer. It's a 3-cost 1/4 double shadow, unblockable. Summon, you may spend power equal to an enemy unit's attack to steal that unit while you have Diese. Murder of Crows, you've been talking about Kilo a lot, and before the show, you mentioned this card in conjunction with Kilo.
Yeah, so this is a card that was also an early access one for the pre-order, so I've been messing around with it. I started it out as a 4-of in a Kilo Expedition deck, and it's been a lot of fun. I've had a few games where on turn 2, the opponent plays a high profit. On my turn 3, I steal the high profit for 0 cost. The biggest blowout was, well, actually, there's a few other ones. Also, the Selfless Offering, I think the card is. The 0/4, 3-cost 0/4 at the start of your turn, sacrifice it and draw 2 cards.
Right, Eager Offering.
Eager Offering, that's the one. So I've stolen that. So basically, the opponent played for my Wisdom of the Elders. I've had games where they've gone late and the opponent dropped a Carpet on 6, and then on my turn 7, I stole the Carpet and attacked with it.
That's pretty good. And you get to attack with it? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so it's quite flexible. It can be a little slow against aggressive decks. If you want to steal their 2-attack unit, you have to wait till turn 5. But it also has great synergy if you're running it in a Kilo deck, since you can steal a unit and then the next turn Kilo that stolen unit away for something else.
Yeah, I guess it works pretty well with Carver too, because as long as you have some way of sacrificing stuff that doesn't cost power, because you have to expend a fair amount of power to get Diese onto the table. If you have some way of sacrificing things, whether it be like Combustion Cell or Carver, some free way of sacrificing things, I think that is usually a good way to use it. And you had to convince me to put it on the show notes for today's show, but yeah, I guess I'm kind of convinced on this one.
Yeah, it does a lot of different things, some pretty cool things. And then the worst case scenario is usually going to be against aggro, where a 1/4 blocker isn't that terrible against a lot of the aggro that you'll see in Expedition, where they're running a lot of 2/1s for 1 and that kind of stuff. So I don't think it's the 4 of after playing it with it a bunch, but I think it certainly is going to have a place in a few decks.
It blocks Milos, isn't it? Like, Murder said this, like, blocks. There's a lot of health for a 3-drop that has this much utility. I don't know, it's the classic thing of card that's good early and good late.
Well, I think it's a pretty embarrassing play to be making on turn 3. I wouldn't call it good early. It's functional early, I suppose. But yeah, I guess it's pretty good late. I guess it's also like a really swingy card. If they just have the removal, you might not be accomplishing very much with it. But yeah, we'll see how much of an impact it makes. Okay, this next one's an exciting one. World Shaper's Staff. It's a 3-cost faction list weapon. Gives +1/+1, and it says when the wielder dies, draw a card and gain, well, 1 of each faction. But I think the big part of this one is it says summon, play a 7/7 Otherworldly Pilgrim. Now that is a created card that is it's a 7/7. It has the ability, it gets -2/-2 for each influence you have. Sorry, is that right? -2 or is it -3?
I think it's -2.
Yeah, okay, it's -2. So basically, if you're playing this in your 2-faction deck, you play the World Shaper's Staff on your 2-drop. That unit gets +1/+1, and then you get a...
You'd get a 3/3.
Yeah, you get a 3/3 attached to it, or like as well with that. And I mean, that's like a pretty reasonable rate, like +4/+4 worth of stats for 3. The issue is that when the wielder dies, you lose the other unit unless you've silenced the Otherworldly Pilgrim, which some people have been talking about.
It also means all future staffs aren't going to summon a pilgrim because it would die immediately.
Yeah, they cycle upon death. Not the pilgrim, but the wielder of the World Shaper's Staff. I think this is a really interesting card. We'll have to see if there is some way to break it. I mean, it does a lot, right? It is a weapon. It has all the synergies that weapons would. It makes a unit that's like a reasonable threat. And saying you're playing a mono-faction deck, that could be a 5/5, and then it also replaces itself when it dies. And it grants influence, which could be useful for, I don't know, for something, I guess. So it's a really interesting card. I think you have to have some way of making this card really unfair in order to want to play it.
I think you really need to focus on abusing the cycling and the influence of it, because especially in Throne, you need to assume that your unit is always going to die and it needs to do something upon, like there has to be some value when you play a unit, or if you're playing a weapon on a unit, it needs to do something. So just playing units in a format like Throne where stuff often doesn't survive long, I think you really need to then focus on the part of the card where it dies, where at least you've cycled and now you have all this influence that maybe you can do something with.
Yeah. Any quick applications off the top of your head, the Boxer?
I don't know. This seems... I think you can use it for the unfair purpose with or it's good for both purposes in a sacrifice deck that has Rectifier, because Rectifier can silence the Pilgrim, and the kind of deck would also just like stuff dying and having influence. So like 5-faction Vox in Expedition, I think.
All right, you heard it here first. 5-faction Vox in Expedition. All right, Jack Mercenary Hunter. I'm kind of skeptical about this card, but I know that you guys want to talk about it at least. It's a 3-cost triple fire 2/3. When Jack hits the enemy player, create and draw a treasure trove. Summon, you may pay 1 and discard a card to deal 2 damage to 2 enemies. Jack gets double damage if it's a sigil. So yeah, it says it costs 3 on the top left corner, but I feel like this card really costs 4.
And if you're wanting to get the double damage, then it's costing 5, since you have to discard the 5th sigil. 5th power has to be in hand in a sigil. to discard.
Important to note that it does specifically say sigil, so you need to be playing. I mean, if you're playing a deck that can support triple fire, you probably have a lot of sigils. Like, you're probably not a 3-faction deck that's cheating on its power base. But yeah, I mean, it does 4 damage to something if you can discard a sigil. If you play it for 4 and discard a sigil, you can immediately shoot 2 things for 4 even. Although I think that like hitting 2 4/4s with this is an extremely optimistic case.
Yeah, I think it's something that demands quite a bit of setup, and not something that you would see in your average 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop aggro deck. I think it's definitely more of a mid-range deck that, for Expedition, would also be looking at playing Eclipse Dragon, Pioneer, Toda, and that kind of stuff to go a bit longer and develop value.
There's a lot of opportunities for this to be underwhelming. Like, if they don't have anything in play for you, like discarding a card and dealing 2 damage to them and drawing a treasure trove. Like, treasure trove is clunky in any kind of aggressive deck.
And you have to somehow hit them with the 2/3, which is not a great stat line for attacking.
Well, its ability would let you hit them.
Oh, I suppose so.
But still, like, cycling a power, or I don't know. I think there's going to be a place where it's good, but it's going to be a more controlling mid-range deck. Or if that exists, this is probably going to be good there. I don't know. I think it requires a lot more to go right than people are thinking right now.
Yeah, you mentioned that before the show. I think that's a good point to mention, especially with new cards. People tend to evaluate them in their best case scenarios more often than they should. So, like, if you don't have a sigil to discard and your opponent's units all have 3 health or more, all of a sudden this card is not looking the best. All right, let's talk about Archmagister's Prophecy. This is a 2-cost relic. Once per turn, you may pay 1 to gain 1 and give one of your units +1 health. At the end of your turn, if you have 12 units with different combinations of attack and health, you win the game. I don't know about you guys, but the first thing that popped into my mind is alternate win condition for Talar combo decks.
That was not the first thing that popped into my mind. I thought of just a life force that, like, win the game is cool, but, like, this is a life force enabler as I see it. Like, have you ever seen whatever that clock, the worst obelisk? Have you ever seen that ultimate? This is harder than that. Way harder.
Yeah, but this is way different because this is at the end of your turn, not the beginning of your next turn. So your opponent isn't necessarily going to have a chance to respond.
Oh, okay. I missed that detail. Yeah, okay, that makes it easier than I thought it was. It's still hard, though, like, because I don't know how many decks naturally have 12 different combinations. Like, you'll need to be doing stuff to, like, this alters the health of units, but
I mean, never mind the different health, how many decks are able to fill a board.
Well, that's the thing, Talar combo. Like, Talar combo, I don't know if it has difficulty winning the game now, but, like,
yeah.
it is the deck that you will be running out of board space the most consistently with, right?
Maybe it's a card in a Rats deck where they get to the point where they're not likely to win by damage, but still you have 12 like board full of rats and other units that you now spend 1 turn per unit to change the health, and that's going to take forever. So
yeah, that sounds like that'll take a very long time. I mean, the thing about the Talar deck is that, like, it's not a unit, so you don't have to worry about it destining to your void, right? That's I think, I don't know if it's a concern anymore. It might be, it might not be. I guess now with Kairos, that just might not be a concern. But definitely when I was trying to play Talar decks, I remember that it was a concern to try to get the victory once you get the combo off. If you're playing something like that just has Inspire, give +1 health or something, that can lead to a lot of different unit sizes. So yeah, I don't know. I think that it's an interesting consideration for it. I haven't played a Talar combo deck in a long time, but that's the first thing that came to my mind.
I think it'll be something that's going to be fun to try and make happen and get the screenshot the one time in 50 that it happens, and then never try
Post
again.
it on Reddit, get some votes.
And then never try it again.
Yeah, okay. All right, the next one, Aurelian Supplier. I'm actually pretty excited about this. It's a 3-cost fire time card. It's a 2/2 charge. It has summon. If the enemy player has more cards in their hand than you, draw a card. If they have fewer units than you, draw a card. So basically, if you're playing against a control deck that just doesn't have any units in but have a lot of cards in hand, you're almost always going to be drawing 2 cards in addition to having a 2/2 charge. And I like cards like this. I like cards that are really slanted this way. and really reward you for dumping your hand early, right? If you have no hand with this and all your units on the board and you play it, you're probably drawing 2 with it.
I've seen comparisons to Golem, but like this is very different. That's general and like fixes your power. This is for a specific matchup and a reward for like probably a more specific game plan than just running even cut. Like yeah, this is for aggro or aggressive mid-range against control, and it rewards running cards like Sand Warrior.
Yeah, I'm down for Sand Warrior. It's also good for cards like Alluring Ember, the one cost 1/1 charge warp, and that's another favorite of mine. Just anything that's like super cheap and plays to the board, I love it.
The comparison to Golem is a Golem is always a Golem unless the opponent has messed with your deck, whereas this is one more cost and is only going to be a Golem if you're the aggressor against control. If you're in a mirror and the opponent's on the play and they get their hand empty faster and drop this, then you're only going to maybe draw 1 card, or you might not drop any.
Yeah, probably not drawing any. The mirror does not sound fun.
Right? And if you're against a deck where they have slightly larger blockers, chances are you don't have the sacrifice synergies like the Golem decks do. So you're paying 3 for a 2/2 that would just sit there since it probably can't attack. So the upside's pretty high if you're going against unitless, but it's got a pretty low floor on it as well to be considerate of.
Yeah, you have to be playing like the most aggressive deck possible, which I'm totally in for. I love that.
Bring back Jito.
Oh boy. I mean, Jito costing 2 and being a 1/1 is like, it hurts.
It hurts.
For those of you who don't know, Jito is a card that in the earliest iterations of Eternal was a 1-cost 1/1 that gave all 1-cost units charge, including itself. And boy, did that kill a lot of people. That was truly a menace of ladder. I think that anyone that was playing during the closed beta remembers it very well. All right, the next card, another card for archetypes that I really enjoy. This is a burn card for all those mono fire people out there. This is Jex Takedown. It's a 3-cost spell, single fire, deal 3 damage to the enemy player or an enemy site. And let's be real here, it's almost always going to hit an enemy player. I can't imagine wanting to hit a site with this. It has quadruple fire. When the enemy player plays a spell, draw Jex Takedown from your void. So I mean, if you're playing against a deck that plays a lot of spells, you're basically always going to have this in hand, assuming you have quadruple fire, which I think that you build your deck with this in mind. It's not too difficult to have. You just play some sort of like heavy fire-based burn deck, and yeah, you're going to be able to get this back into your hand again and again. I don't think that this is very good. I just don't think that burn strategies are good, but I think it's a really nice addition for it, and really interesting design space.
Yeah, I think it is interesting design space. It's interesting to note how it can combo a little bit with the Jack we just talked about. If you're okay discarding a non-sigil, you can discard this and then get it back later.
This is also like fuel. This is more fuel for bullet shapers, or just if they make more cards, like any cards in the future that are wanting to discard stuff in Fire and Justice. You know, this is not necessarily going to be doing a ton right now, but keep an eye out on it. Just returning to your hand, no matter what it is a powerful effect that gets better as the game gets more cards.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think that this is really that big of a part of like bullet shaper decks, because I don't know, I think if you're playing this card, you need to be doing damage to your face, or it's a one of in your market or something that is just used as an engine, as a card engine, to always have a card in your hand against control decks. Because like against an aggro deck, this card is super embarrassing. It's not even just embarrassing, it's super embarrassing. And the last card we have today is Clock Tower Sentinel. It's a 9-cost 12/12 for single time. At the end of your turn, each of your units get +1/+1. And at the end of your turn, if it's in your void, units in your void get +1/+1. I think that this is a super interesting one. Like the first ability, I think is just like not very exciting. 9 costs to play a 12/12. probably not happening. Although you could reanimate it. It's a Sentinel, so Stirring Sands does work on it. But I think the more interesting part of it is that if it's going to be in your Void and buffing all of your units in your Void, I think that is pretty interesting. Looks like Murder of Crows just added another card. So we will have one card after this.
No, we'll have two more.
Oh, we have two more. Oh, okay. So I think that like Clock Tower Sentinel is it leads itself to like a really interesting deck construction. You need some way of getting in your Void because I don't think you're playing it fairly with this one. But like using it for late game Air Mods machinations just sounds fantastic. You can have units that have been growing in your Void turn after turn after turn, and then finally you get this huge payoff and you get 3 huge units. I have high hopes of trying this card out and trying to make it work.
It's also of note that it's a Sentinel.
Where I see this is a deck with Endless Nightmares and Dawnwalker, because if those get big enough, there'll be recurring Dawnwalkers every turn. So you just mill yourself like crazy, and then you bring back these whole boards every turn. You also have like...
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, what do you think the best way to mill yourself for that type of thing is?
4 malaise.
There's the 2/2 cultist that mills a card at the start of your turn.
Yeah.
Oh, Zenzu? Zenzu seems pretty slow, but yeah, that does sound pretty good. I mean, you don't have to do anything. Once you set it up, you don't need a payoff. Like, your payoffs are free in your Void, so yeah, that does sound pretty interesting. All right, let's get on to these last two. I passed these up for a reason. Okay, whatever, we'll talk about them anyway. Why don't you tell us about the next two?
So the first one I put up there, Mother of Skies, and something that, so it's 2 costs, double primal for a 1/4 with flying. And the first time you play a multi-faction unit each turn, play a 1/2 Cloud Snake with flying. So I understand why you skip this one, but I've seen some discussion on the main Direwolf Digital Discord server about pairing this with Kilo. So you play this, then you play a Kilo and get a Snake, and then you can sack the Snake for another Kilo, or you can sack it for another Mother, you could sack it for a Golem. So in combination with Kilo, and maybe you'd certainly have to warp your deck to be playing more multi-faction units, but there might be something fairly powerful there in being able to get free units each turn.
I guess so. 1/4 flying does not really excite me, like the body size. I guess it's a good blocker against aggro, but needing to have multi-faction units, I just don't feel like we're there yet. I can see this being a card that it makes an impact down the line if we get a lot more multi-faction units, but as it stands, it feels like most of the units I want to be playing aren't multi-faction.
Yeah, it would take quite a bit of building around to get it to work, and it's possible that there's not enough multi-faction units to get there, but there might be. So it's something that I think is going to be worth exploring, and the synergy with Kilo is pretty interesting.
Okay, and this other one?
So the last one is a 4-cost spell, double primal, called Turn to Seed. So choose an enemy unit, transform it, and each copy into 0/2 seeds, including from their hand, deck, and void. So it hits all zones except for the market. It also hits each enemy, so it hits every copy on their board. So if they have multiples, they'll hit them all. And the O2 seed is an O2 that if it stays alive for 5 turns in play, it gets +5/+5. So it would turn into a 5/7. So it does create a unit that eventually needs to be dealt with.
Yeah, but 5 turns is a very long time.
It's a very
in case
long
anyone
time.
is wondering.
So I think it's interesting. It's possible at best it's a transposed market target. I think it's a card that's probably going to be overplayed initially, and in Throne I don't think it's something you would want to play because it's dead to a lot of matchups, or it's going to be too slow in a lot of matchups. 4 costs, kill spell, slow speed is really not what you would want to be looking for.
Editing Sunyveil, just stepping in to say that we actually have heard from the official Direwolf server that this card will actually cost 3 and not 4, so keep that in mind while evaluating Turn to Seed. Yeah, like, the The removal is worse in Expedition, but I feel like unless this is hitting a card that you absolutely need to deal with, or it's hitting multiple cards, I just don't think it's that exciting. Like, I guess it's pretty interesting against like cards that have Echo, for example. Like, that works pretty well, but for the most part, I mean, even 4-cost kill a unit at slow speed, I'm not sure if I'm interested in that.
I think it's going to be a market card for Expedition, or if you're running Transpose, it makes Transpose a little bit better because it was a pretty poor market spell to begin with, but maybe there's a control deck that wants to protect their face relics and can use this to deal with all of the opponent's Katos or something like that.
Yeah. All right, fair enough. Okay, well, this expansion drops on Monday, which is a few days away. Especially if you're listening to this, it's probably not going to be. Well, I don't know. I could get this out the day that we record it. But yeah, that's about it for the cards that from the new expansion that we're excited about. Let us know what you think of the cards, if you agree, disagree, or have any other interesting applications. And yeah, be sure to chat about it in the Discord. I mean, still, I've said this a lot, but still probably the best place to stay connected for competitive Eternal. Anything you would like to plug, Murder of Crows?
No, I don't think so. I think for the expansion, there's going to be a preview event this weekend, so looking forward to taking a look at that and seeing if maybe there's more new cards that we can try out. But other than that, the QCP events are in a couple weeks, so I'm going to be brewing with the new cards for that and looking forward to those tournaments.
Oh yeah, and for listeners, you can be sure that we're going to have preview episodes of FECast for that, as we always do. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me. It was great to have you on the cast, Murder of Crows. I think the Boxer is probably gone already, but congratulations again to the Boxers. Oh, he's still here.
Thanks for having me. As always, check out my articles at teamlankster.com. Watch Worlds.
Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely be rooting for you. You're the only person from the cast to have made it so far, right? So you're definitely atop my rooting list. Congratulations again. I think this was it's a rare case of the best player in the room won the tournament. I mean, we had that with Man and Mouse in that limited tournament before, and I mean, so far up until this point in the season, you definitely had the best results going into the weekend. So it's really great to see you take it down. All right. Of course, this episode would not be possible without our generous patron sponsors. I'd like to thank D-Dub, Work Done Son, Yeast Out, Chris Ye, and Chamomilk for supporting the show. Thank you very much. If you would like to be like these lovely people and support FECast, Friends of Eternal, and keep us going, head on over to patreon.com/Friends of Eternal and consider donating today. All right, well, thanks for listening. I'm looking forward to playing with these new cards, and until next time, we will see you in the friend zone. Friends of Eternal is awesome, but you know what's even more awesome? Our amazing patrons over at patreon.com. That's right, Friends of Eternal now has a Patreon where you can help support the content and initiatives of Friends of Eternal. If you enjoy FECast and you enjoy the Piloting Club and you want to join the people that make all this possible and sustainable, be sure to head over to patreon.com/Friends of Eternal and consider donating. Every little bit does help. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time on FECast.